Hi BookTube and happy Monday. I planned to film this yesterday, but I was reading and time just got away from me. I ran out of time, so I couldn't film. But I am surrounded by a pile of books. I tried to categorize them in a way to talk about the books I've read so far. I would ideally like to do weekly wrap-ups, but I will take a bi-monthly wrap-up, I guess, and then maybe next week do a weekly wrap-up. But I am focusing on National Short Story Month and Horror Mayhem are the two reading events I'm participating in. And then also I had a third one of my own of reading books set in Florida that were on my shelf to prepare for a Florida trip that I ended up not being able to go on because I got sick. But I still read a couple of books for that. So the one book, I counted the books so far and I've read 12 books. A lot of them were like 90s YA. So I think that accounts for the higher number. But I did read the Willa Cather, for this is for the National Short Story Month. I read the Uncollected Short Stories from 1892 to 1929, and this is a Library of America edition. And it has a bind-up of many of her short stories and essays and things like that. But this was actually voted on by you guys because I did my first ever poll where I had 3 authors to choose from. And so I read these Willa Cather stories, and I don't know if it was just my mood at the time because, like I said, at first I was like anxious for the trip because it's a very long plane and travel day for me to get there and all that and do it as a work event, blah blah blah, all of that. And then I got sick, so like just my overall mood the first part of May was not my, I guess, my normal my normal mode or whatever, you know. So I think that tainted my appreciation of this because a lot of these stories had such a grim element, you know, being out on the plains in Nebraska, you know, where she's famous for this kind of setting. I'm gonna put this book down because it's just a boring brown cover because the book I got didn't have a dust jacket. But yeah, so I don't know if it's like the grim setting, and then there's lots of like single men, bachelors, like drinking, and just this sense of hopelessness and despair. So that just wasn't helping what I was going through, and so I didn't enjoy this near as much as I know I could have. So I'll leave it at that. And then for the Florida books, I read 2 of them. I have a James A. Michener Recessional. This, when I was looking into this after I read it, this was the very last book that Michener ever wrote. And this is set in a nursing home for elderly people, and there's this man that comes to town and he is going to help the business flourish. It's a nursing home, and it's also like a retirement center, and then it's like a intensive care center as well. So there's like 3 different tiers to it. And unfortunately this was not I guess the best pick for me with Michener because it's not his typical writing style. I mean, his typical, you know, sense of story, I feel like. I think this is the first book. I think I've dabbled with Michener before. I've tried a couple of his books, but I've never committed fully to any of this. I think it's the very first book I've read from him. And it's a shorter book, but it's still like 400 or 500 pages, so not exactly that short. It just didn't deliver what I wanted. The plot wasn't there that much. It was much more of a character study in a way, but it just didn't hold my interest. Nothing was that interesting about it. And then knowing that he died shortly after this, I wonder was he considering going into like a nursing home or something at the time, and that made him, you know, go down this path of writing the story. I don't know, but if anyone does know about him or his life, let me know. But yeah, I need to pick another Michener. I really want to read Chesapeake. I feel like that's the one to read. And then the other Florida book I read was Take Place in Palm Beach, Poinciana. This is a Phyllis A. Whitney. This, I'm pretty sure I can mention before is a reread for me because I read all of her books way back when I was in middle school, high school age. And this, I can't remember a character's name. Who are the characters? Sharon. Okay, yes. Sharon marries Ross. Okay, so Sharon is recently an orphan. Her famous parents die, and she although she's an orphan, she's, I don't know exactly her age, like 18 to 20, something like that. And she, shortly after her parents die, she meets Ross, which is her parents' family friend, which is kind of, it was kind of weird to me. It's kind of like an uncle kind of figure is how he reads, because he's a very wealthy older man with like gray hair and things like that. But she falls in love with him based on who she thinks he is, and then gets swept off into his like luxurious, gigantic house on Palm Beach, right on the water. But once she arrives and gets settled in, things aren't how they seem. You know, there's a maid, there's the butler, and there's people that are living in this gigantic house, and on the grounds as well, in these little cottages. And none of them seem particularly happy, even though they're at this wonderful setting. And especially her husband, like he immediately is giving these like red flags of why he himself was interested in her. Like, you know, she was distraught after her parents' death, and as the main reason, you know, she was like using him as a kind of a crutch in a way of getting through that grief. And so he's someone she's known, like, it seems to be like her whole life. And but for him, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a reason that he is interested in her, and it's not it's not sustainable basically for their marriage. And yeah, so, and then there's a whole other mystery going on with this as well. But it was okay enough. But just her being so young and with this, like, seems to me like a 50 or 60-year-old, that was a bit off-putting. But yeah, so this is like the typical like old gothic suspense story. Okay, so then we'll go to the Horror Mayhem books, and I have a stack here of those. And this again was kind of like a mixed bag. We'll get the dud out of the way. Sorry for shaking the camera. This is Blood Feud by Cullen Bunn, Drew Moss, and Nick Filardi. I've read Cullen, I think it was Cullen Bunn before, because he or she, I don't know, I think Cullen's guy's name, wrote, or maybe I'm thinking of someone else. I'm thinking like who they, because I thought it was like Harrow County was a story I thought that he had written, but I don't see it on the blurb on the back. I think I saw it somewhere though. And that one, I know I at least read the first one of that, and that has like the spooky like October storyline to it. But this one, it's about these creatures that come, and let's see if I can show you a picture of them. And they are just, hold on a second. Because they're like grotesque. Like, here's one. They're grotesque, but they're like almost unidentifiable. But it's about what are their names? Because again, it doesn't. I guess it doesn't matter. But it's following these two guys, and they're just driving along, and then they meet this woman. And so they start talking and getting to know each other, and then someone mysteriously dies, and they bring the body back to the house, and then all of a sudden he turns into this like creature, and they're kind of like vampires or zombies, and like just take over the whole town. But the story was, even though that could be interesting, this was not interesting. I didn't like the drawing. I didn't like the story. I didn't like how the story ended. But the only thing I like about it is this like kind of spooky tree. That's about, in the color. That's about all I like about the story. But I only paid $3 for it, so I mean, there's that. There's that saving grace, I guess. I then read, because I've been slowly making my way through the Fear Street books by Earl Stein. I think this is book 5 or 6. This is called The Sleepwalker. So she isn't safe even in her dreams. She, the main character is, what's her name? Myra, and she keeps dreaming and waking up right near Fear Street, and can't figure out how that is happening, because she takes a job working at a house on Fear Street, and that's her first like encounters with it, even though she's heard, you know, bad things happen on Fear Street, don't go there at night, and that kind of thing. So she starts working at this house, and she thinks initially that the woman is a witch, but as she gets to know the situation more, she figures out it's not that. But something is going on, so I don't want to give it away. But yeah, I like the cover enough. And then I read The Invitation by Diane Ho. This is RSVP or Die. And this is about Sarah and her, Sarah and her group of friends. There's 4 of them. And they unexpectedly get invited to this like gigantic mansion of a house, like the biggest house in the town, and with like the richest, most popular girl, and someone who they're not friends with. And at first, some of the friends, because it follows all 4 their perspectives, some of them are like, oh, so excited, I can't believe I got picked, I get to go and hang out and see these people. And the other ones are like, I don't want to go, but I guess because all my other friends are going, I'm going to go. But when they get there, the host immediately picks all 4 of them out, and they get taken away from the party, and it turns into like a treasure hunt in a way, hide and seek, but with gruesome ends. So there's that one. And then I read the first book in the Goosebump series, Welcome to Dead House. And yeah, I think I mentioned this recently because I just picked this up over the weekend. This is about Amanda and Josh, and they are moving to a new house, as you do in all these scary stories, and things aren't what they seem. They are gifted this house. Their dad, he gets a letter in the mail saying some twice removed or whatever, like family member has died, and they've never heard of him before. But they're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. Of course, they're going to take up this house. And now he doesn't have to work, and he can just focus on what he wants to do. But as soon as they arrive, the kids, Amanda and Josh, start, especially Amanda, that's the main character you're following, start seeing these people popping up in the windows or down the hallways, or hearing these whispering, or these feet walking, the pitter patter of your feet on the carpet and the steps and stuff. But she starts to ignore it. Just like, oh, I guess this is the way the house is. I'm not going to pay attention. I'm going to go about my day, and I'm not going to let it bother me. I'm going to keep sleeping, through the night kind of thing. But then it comes to a point in the town where that cannot no longer be ignored. So yeah, there's that one. And then the one ebook I read, so I've been really good with reading my physical books. Of the 12, 11 of them were physical books. So yay for that, because I do want to focus on what I have. Although, I'm currently reading a bunch of ebooks because I've been such diving into all my physical books. I'm like, I'm neglecting my e-reader. So I'm still reading the Sophie Kinsella book, and then I want to read. There's another Florida book I had, and a goofy one by Jana De Leon, and Babysitter's Club book, and then I'll get back to reading on my shelves. But that's neither here nor there, because we're talking about the books I actually have read. So this is Finding Winnie: The True Story of the World's Most Famous Bear by Lindsay Maltic, and it's illustrated by Sophie Blackhall. Let me turn down the brightness so you can see it a bit better. But I had no idea the history of Winnie the Pooh. And I think because last month I was doing the Picture This, where you're reading a bunch of children's picture books during the month. I think this is one was left over from borrowing books at my library. But I had no idea the origin of Winnie, the bear, and he was found at his army base, and is adopted by one of the soldiers, and so it's the story of him and the bear going around these different places, and how what ends up happening to Winnie. The artwork I didn't really care for, especially the drawings of the humans. For some, I don't know, something about it I didn't care for. So I wanted to show a picture of what the artwork looks like inside. But yeah, something about the colors, with the cheeks with the pale skin. Something about it I don't care for. But yeah, but the story was interesting enough. It says, I've decided to name her Winnipeg, so we'll never be far from home. Winnie for short. So Winnie's a girl. Yeah, they must have changed that with the Disney changing into a boy. So yeah, that's the one ebook I've read. And then switching to the last couple of books I've read from my shelf, I have a couple of mass markets, and then I have a Gladys Taber. I was reading this mostly in April, but I finished it in May, so I'm counting it for, of course, books I've read in May. But yeah, this didn't come with a dust jacket. I would like to have it with a dust jacket. But here's the inside. There's something more to look at. It's illustrated by Edward Chinton. Let's see. And what I liked for this one is that as you go through like November, for example, and this one says The Road to Still Meadow, it has a little poem. It's a song for November, but it's kind of like a little poem, and then it has each chapter has that little emblem there. So you have like January. The only artwork you have is like the title chapter, and then you have the little ink drawing here. But yeah, I really liked it. So this starts in, because she never starts in January, even though it chronicles a year of time. Yeah, it starts in November and ends in October. And there's a little postscript as well for Still Meadow. But yeah, this is just joy to read. They all kind of blend together in a way. All of these Still Meadow books, because like chronicling a year in her life. But it's a very like simple story in a way of just her appreciating nature and like the simple ways of life, like the cooking and watching the leaves turn and what her animals are getting up to. She has quite the number of Cocker Spaniels to be dealing with, and they seem to be getting into everything. And then she has a couple of cats as well. So yeah, she had a very busy life. But yeah, this kind of blends together. The one thing I will say is this book, this edition came out in, well, this one says 1948, but no, never mind, hold on. In 1984. It originally came out in 1937. And I think that this has been updated because when I was reading it, this book, what did I just say? It came out in 1930 something? 1937. So that was before World War II. But there's several references in here to World War II. So there has been some kind of update or revision to this. So I want to see somehow if I can get a copy that was one of the older editions. Because if you look at the copyright, there's many years of it going through like the different rounds of publishing. So if I can find one of the older ones, that would be interesting. Or see if I can research more on how this was revised, because I would like the original if I could. Just to compare, like, especially these books when they're in the early stages of her career in writing, in her early days at Still Meadow. Okay, so then I have a bunch of mass markets. So I have Sweet Valley High, book number 26, Hostage, Can Anyone Save Regina Morrow? And Regina was a character several books ago. She is deaf, and there's this like magical cure that's somewhere in Europe. I think it's Switzerland, that's gonna cure her of deafness. And so even though she has moved to Sweet Valley and has made a bunch of friends and has a boyfriend, her boyfriend is like the rich snob, obnoxious guy, Bruce Patton. That he's like a reoccurring character, and he's always up to no good. But anyway, so she goes to Switzerland, and now all of a sudden she's back, but is not making appearances at the high school and isn't seen about the town. She was only glimpsed once, and so why is she in lockdown? What's going on there? And so then the twins, Jessica and Elizabeth, are on the case to figure out what's going on. And then I have And You Give Me a Pain, Elaine, by Stella Pevsner. This is winner of the Golden Kite Award. I'm not sure what that award is about, but this is a holdover from April as well. I was reading this for Old School April, and it came out in 1978. And at first you have, what is this character's name? Andrea. So yeah, Andrea is the younger sister, and then she has her older sister, Elaine, and Elaine is constantly going against the parents on what their rules and curfew and things like that, and is constantly getting into trouble. And so then Andrea is left to pick up things, like pick up the house, do the laundry, all the things that the older sister should do. She is left like holding the bag basically, and the parents aren't giving her any attention because they're constantly worried about Elaine. So this is like, pretty straightforward, simple enough story. But about the last fourth of this book, it completely takes a turn and shifts gears, and you would not expect this at all to happen, and it ends up very sad actually. So that was interesting to see in this story. And I want to say I've read before a book about the different decades with these like early young adult books and like the themes that are, or like how they take on stories. And I want to say the 1970s, they were talking about can be very like hard hitting, um, like, you know, like real life kind of, not that the other ones aren't, but the 70s in particular could be kind of sharp, I guess, with some of their stories. And so after that one, I wanted to read something a little bit more lighthearted, even though it doesn't start out lighthearted. I don't know. It wasn't epically sad or anything like that. But anyway, regardless, I switched to reading Love by Degree by Debbie Macomber. This is a Harlequin romance, an older one. This is number, oh, it's all like blurred out in a way with the creasing spine. I want to say it's number 2835. But this is about Ellen, and she is working on getting her degree in college, but she's a bit older. I think she's like 25 or so, but can't afford the rent in Seattle, and so she roommates with a bunch of like high school boys basically. They're just in college for the first time when they're like 18 or 19 years old. So she kind of is like the house mother, and she's like taking care of them and like cooking their meals and doing all the repairs around the house. But then Reed, the owner of the property, comes back into town. He's been away for work, and then at first is distraught that his little brother has taken over the house with all these rentals, and he didn't tell the older brother about it, even though it's like he owns the house. And especially, who is this woman? What is she doing here? So there's like some contention there, but then of course it's a Harlequin romance, so the two people are going to end up together, and this was okay enough. It was a simple story, and I liked it enough for what it is. But I feel like with Debbie Macomber books, I don't like necessarily, I mean, her books aren't horrible or anything like that, but the newer books aren't as, I feel like, as good. I feel like I like not the oldest, not the newest books, but like those ones in the middle, I feel like are where she hits her stride with things. But yeah, but it was still interesting to read about. And this one came out, when was this one published? 1987. Yeah. Yeah, I like the cover. the haircuts, especially with the woman's haircut. But yeah, that's what I've been up to so far in May. I hope to read just as many books before the end of the month, but we'll see what happens. But I will talk to you soon. Thanks, BookTube.